Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmer at Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for January 30th, Thursday. We've got one more day of the week to go. Holy cow, a lot of events that we've had this week, and a lot of like intraday volatility that we've had. A whole lot for like the market really not going anywhere. Risk disclaimer in front of you: everything that we're going through is for information purpose only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for information purpose only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like strategy in this tape. I'm going to talk a little bit about like what's working right now in this tape. Ultimately, this was a day where it was kind of interesting because, again, we're dealing with a situation where there's a pretty good breadth underneath the hood of the market. And if you take a look at, like, say, for example, like what the equally weighted S&P did today was pretty darn good today. That was up over 1% for the day. Also, the small caps did well today. They were up 1%, but it kind of just seems like some of these things are just kind of churning a little bit, where they're kind of just exploring a range in the short term. But that's still giving us some good trading opportunities. And you have to be willing to kind of adjust your trading system a little bit to how this market is trading in a range. Clearly, some of the bigger cap names, when a Microsoft and an Nvidia are down on the day, it's going to affect things in terms of a market cap weighted index versus an equally weighted index. But I would say before I kind of get into the technicals, for the bulls, you're still seeing, if I have this, let me see if I have this up. This is this is again something that if you're a regular viewer of my videos, I talk a lot about 4-week new highs versus new lows in the SPX, because I like to know what's happening under the hood. And we have a lot more new highs than we have new lows. And you could find this in my Substack every day. I tweet this out for free. You could also just pay a little bit of money if you want to see, what my trade ideas for the day are and open positions, which every day are marked to market. But if you want to just see stats in terms of like, I try to provide that. I don't know anybody else who really does that type of thing consistently, where I provide the stats every day. Are more stocks going up or more stocks going down? Usually when I see more stocks going up, so for example, like today, 23% of the S&P made a new high today, even though and only 5% made a new low. That's pretty darn good for me. When I looked at the S&P for the majority of the day, and it was like up about 1/3%. S&P did close up 0.5%, so that's pretty good. So as long as this does not cover today, this chart down here on the bottom is delayed by one day. But as long as you have more stocks going up versus going down, I think that that's a positive situation. And of course, what we want to do is monitor for change for when we know for when the situation changes. I'll also say this too. Just looking at some of the movers here, and I'm just going to bring up the regular market. And again, I'm going to enlarge this so that you don't have to squint your eyes. But you also have like, I would say the first week of earnings that we had some very good earnings by things like the banks had good earnings, Netflix had good earnings, right? But there's been a couple days in here or there where you're going to have some names that went down pretty decently too. So, for example, these are just large companies, but UPS went down a lot. ServiceNow went down a lot today. Cigna, CHRW, right? Microsoft was down 6% for the day. So it's not a clean earnings where everything, where all of these companies are doing well, but and there's a mix of companies in here too, but it's beginning to get a little bit mixed in terms of the earnings. But as long as we're finding the strong names, like IBM had a great quarter, up 13%. So we're getting those examples on a day-to-day basis. Now, our job is basically, my view is that some of the names that have had really good earnings are going to be very good setups for the next quarter. They're going to have relative strength versus some other things. So I think, that's really our job to kind of keep track of that. And that's what we do at Tribeca Trade Group, is we put together a list of every earnings of the names that really are executing well, because I think that there's also names that are not doing that as well. So where to start for, let me go back to this, and we'll go through some groups. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit. I think I've got the S&P chart up here. So yeah, I mean, I think where are we at, being that there's only one more more day left. And by the way, we have more. Tomorrow is going to be another busy day. We've got the PCE, not the PCE deflator. They changed the name. It's the PCE price index. They're looking for 0.3%. So that's another gauge of inflation. Why is that important? Because the Fed is really going to be watching inflation, and they could adjust whether or not they decide to cut rates this year based on what the inflation is telling us. Notice for month to date, or I guess year to date, the mid caps continue to do the best. That's up 4.7%, and SPY's up 3%. That's not bad, right? That's not a bad month, right? You know, that's a very good month actually. So even though we've had this for the last week where we're kind of back and forth, we've definitely have had a good month. SPY continues to kind of, you know, since we dropped, it's methodically been kind of going back and forth here. It's trying to get this bottom of the value area for the week has been very interesting because it's been that way the last couple days. Again, giving you ranges. But like I said, there's a lot more. If you're just looking at the indices, for example, SPY, you're not catching all the moves. And because again, you're getting names that are falling, like the Microsoft and Nvidia, but you're also getting some really good stories out there. Here's so these two lines, by the way, I know this is a little bit confusing to my eyes. It's very easy to see, but if you're like, geez, what's going on with all these boxes? The yellow boxes is the value area for the week. Right. And that's based on all of last week's activity. The gray box, which is the bigger box, is the value area for the month. Now, we did something here recently, a few months back, with the value areas and the MarketWebs on TradingView, where you could see these multiple time frames on one screen. It becomes very instrumental to do that. By the way, look at the, you know, and here marked the bottom, right? We hit the bottom of the value area for the month, took out that 1 hour VPOC. And since then, you know, the trajectory has been up, even though we've kind of stalled out here the last 2 days. So resistance, there's two lines of resistance there, 604.37, and then the top of value area for the month, which is 606.56, and probably a third one too. But we only have one more day of the month and one more day of the year. Sorry, one more day of the week and one more day of the month. And then we'll be on to February, not one more day of the year. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here's, by the way, so here's RSP. Notice the difference. It looks a little bit different, right? We made a bigger move here from a couple weeks ago, started the week all over the place, but this has showed a little bit more power here towards the end of the week. That's RSP. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's just a lot of chop. IWM also, look at how many days. I mean, some of the stuff, like the market just really makes you kind of, it cracks you up a little bit, right? Some people don't like any indicators on their charts. I get it. They just like to look at price. But wouldn't you want to know where there's resistance? And I talk about the 50-day moving average all the time, right? And I use that in conjunction with the value areas. Why would I use the 50-day moving average? Because I see these guys, oh, it's so great, just look at price. Well, wouldn't you want to know where resistance is? Look at, we've hit IWM, hit the 50-day moving average. This was back on the 21st. It touched it again on the 22nd, almost again on the 23rd, failed on the 24th. It tried and it failed. It touched it again on the 27th, right? It didn't make it there on the 28th. And again, it tried to break it, and again, and it failed. So wouldn't you want to know, like, that's the breaking point? You know, that's something. And also the 200-day moving average, where buyers also show up. Why would you not want that information? I don't know. Some people, they've got a real like cockiness to them about why they don't want to use this information or why they think they don't need it. But I think that many of those folks, I question not whether they're actually trading or, you know, or just being cocky. And that's fine. If you want to just be cocky, that's fine, without actually having any skin in the game too. That's fine too. But regardless, that's what I'm watching in the IWM and the small caps. I wanted to talk about Nvidia. This was something that, you know, of course, everybody's talking about Nvidia and what happened with, I'm calling it deep sink, but you could call it whatever you want. But notice what, like, everybody's been piling into, like, retail traders piling into Nvidia. Yes, there's a level to trade off here. Absolutely. That level is 116. And there's a VPOC here that we bounced off of, but this hasn't gone anywhere, right? And it could be, I made this a comment, you know, we do pre-market prep every day at 8 o'clock in the morning. You can find that on YouTube. You could find that on Twitter as well. You could watch that live. But I've been talking about how letting the dust settle in this name a little bit, and there's been so many other things that have dipped and have recovered quite nicely based on this move. So that's been my stance all week long. So today, there's no rush. I get it. People see a big dip and it attracts them to it because they're like, geez, that's if I've only had a dip in Nvidia before, and I get it, right? That makes a lot of sense. But from a short-term aspect, we talked about this morning the power companies. Mark Chaikin said, "Hey, that's a gift." Right. So when you look at all the names that go down in sympathy, right, you're going to find instead of going right into the eye of the storm, there's better opportunities. Look at what GEV has done. Now you had to wait a day or two, right, for this to kind of work itself out. But look at how much this has recovered, right? And this went down. It's the same type of drop. I'm not going to give you, measure the exact percentage, but they're both large moves to the downside, all the way down to 340. Look at the stocks up 50 points from there. Look at what VST did today, right? That's a huge move, right? Stocks, same thing, drops from 190 down to 140 and has recovered half that move already, or more so than half the move. So I think this takes a little bit of trading experience to understand that there's going to be, better things that are moving back up. CEG is another name. Now hasn't moved up quite as much, but it's better than going out and buying, going right into the eye of the storm, in my opinion. So there's a lot of different things. I know people are also talking about the nuclear names, like those also got hit pretty decently. Oklo went all the way down to $30. Now these are volatile names, but you keep in mind, like all of this stuff dipped. So you go out and you kind of look for some support, but you don't have to rush into some of these things that are right in the middle. And sometimes I see that with earnings too. Sometimes you'll see a name go down on earnings, and retail traders, they're like, I got to look at that. Meanwhile, it could have affected 5 other companies that they didn't have bad news, and they are usually the ones to first recover, in my opinion. So I thought I would just kind of go through that a little bit with you, but in terms of things that I thought if we go back to yesterday's video and where I left off, I was talking about Bitcoin, and I was talking about how Bitcoin was particularly strong. Now it didn't close on the highs, but it gave us a little bit of trading opportunities in things like Hood, which I think is the best play right now for playing names that are associated with the crypto move. So Hood back out to new highs. This was also a name that I bought on the dip earlier in the week. This is IBKR, right? Strong earnings, right? Now, again, it didn't dip as much, but it dipped from the highs all the way down to 204 and is moving back up to 218. So I did take some targets in that today. What else? This China move, very, very strong. We talked about that in yesterday's video too. Again, Baba made a very nice move today. This is up another 6%. I don't know if that got hit on the tariff stuff, but again, I think that you want to be like, if you're in some of these names, it's important to take targets, right? And not shoot for, home runs, considering that if most of you witnessed the last Trump presidency, you know that he's going to be going after China in terms of tariffs at some point. It's just a matter of time, right? And hence going after going after Canada and Mexico first and seeing how that happens. Now, remember, again, like I try to not really get into too many of the politics, but you have to talk about some of the stuff. Remember that Trump uses these things as a bargaining chip, right? He did this with Venezuela the other day. They wouldn't take back some of the folks that are here illegally, and they changed their mind, and Trump says, okay, we're going to tariff you 20%. Boom, all of a sudden, the plane landed in Venezuela. So he uses these things as a bargaining chip, and he knows how to use it. Whether or not he does, like, I'm not backing him, I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying that we've kind of seen this play out before. So you kind of have to understand how he's going to use this and get over this sticker shock of that. He's going to use it again as a bargaining chip. That said, there's going to be knee-jerk reactions to this stuff. Other movers for the day. Let's go back into here for a second. The gold. Gold made a big move. So and that's gave us a really good signal, back into here and to the top of the value area, and is done well. And I added GLD into one of my portfolios, but this was very nice. I mean, look at what KGC did today. That's a gold miner. Also, the silver miners got going today. PAAS had a big move. So that's where there's moves. So I would not neglect some of these precious metals names and this area of the market. Again, you don't have to stay in for that long, but I think ultimately they could be trades. Uh, just one second here. I'm going to go through a couple names with you. We already talked about GEV, which is the top name. That's a name that this is where I kind of start the weekend watch list. And then I add to names as the week progresses, such as GEV, which is the best performer now on the list since the trigger. And again, these are triggers based on technical levels in the MarketWebs. A couple other names that I'm going to detail for you. Jabil. Now, Apple, I think, is down a little bit after earnings. It's not that big of a mover, but Apple rallied into the report, right? So that's the situation. I did not do anything with Apple because look at the move it's made over the last week. If we were sitting down here, I would have probably put on an Apple trade, but it just rallied too much, and that's what happens is these names are going to react pretty decently. So that's Apple. One name that sometimes moves on Apple is Jabil. This is a name that had really good earnings back in here and has rallied since. Again, this is why we pay attention to strong earnings names, because people think, oh my God, it gapped from 134 and it went up to 147. Oh, I missed it. No, you didn't, because institutions are then going to have to go ahead and start accumulating the name, right? And this made a move all the way up to 174. Notice it pulled back here to the 20-day moving average, and I think looks pretty interesting. Also a name that, the cyber names went crazy a couple days ago. Notice what CrowdStrike is doing here. It's just consolidating some of those gains. So 2 inside days. I would have this name on your watch list tomorrow. One of the earnings, very nice moves today was CLS as well. That was another reason too that, we talked about just a minute ago about other names recovering. And I think this also helped the power names quite a bit. This is what we went over pre-market at Tribeca Trade Group, talking about the move at CLS, right? And data and processors and so forth, and that kind of ignited the move that we saw in the power names today. So a couple other names that I just wanted to highlight for you. Another name that GWRE is another strong name. I would watch for this name. This name is trying to take that next leg higher, right? It sold off a little bit on earnings, but recovered and is looking quite strong. I'm going to leave it there for now. Again, we've got a lot more information, but again, I would really be cognizant of how you're adding to positions. I did this. So you can kind of see. I'll bring up my trading blotter for the day. ACN is another name that I took a target in. This morning. FTNT was a name that I took a target in this morning. Also didn't close on the highs, but still trying to break that range higher. All right, I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.